Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jordan Lapierre, the Director of Public Relations here at the Partnership for Public Service, and your host for today. We have a great and timely discussion ahead about the role of social media in the public sector and how you, as federal communicators, can harness the opportunities offered by social platforms to reach your key audiences in new and different ways. At the Partnership for Public Service, we're dedicated to building a more effective government and, in turn, a stronger democracy. And we work from the outside to support government leaders, build the skills and capacity with the federal workforce, and shine a light on the great work being done by career civil servants every day. So today's conversation about how to reach the public with the right messages in the right places is right up our alley, and hopefully it's up yours as well. Before we get started, a quick reminder, if you'd like to receive more information about our events for federal communicators or any of the other dozens of virtual and in-person events the partnership offers throughout the year, please be sure to sign up for our newsletters at ourpublicservice.org. Now, turning back to today's conversation, I'm delighted to welcome a great friend of the partnership and someone who has spent her career working in and around social media. Emily Keller is a strategic partner manager for civics content at YouTube. Emily, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm very
Absolutely. I'd love to start by just having you share a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got to where you are today.
Yes, so I started my career in political campaigns. When I was in school at Boston University, I was a fellow on President Obama's reelection campaign in 2012. And as a fellow, I kind of took over our state's social media channels. And I was like the designated intern for that. I think at that point, we still called it new media, a blast from the past for those who remember. And then from there, I started as a field organizer for Ed Markey for Senate, and Terry McAuliffe for governor in Virginia. I was the digital director on a campaign called Raise Up Massachusetts, where we campaigned for earned sick time for every worker in Massachusetts. And I ran all of our social and email programs and the website, because at that point, digital was just one skill set. And then I worked on a campaign to legalize marijuana in Ohio, which did not go great, but you gotta try. And which I was the deputy digital director on that campaign. And then I ended up at the Democratic National Committee for the 2020 cycle, where I was the social media director. And I ran at the Democrats' accounts as well as Tom Perez's accounts, as he was chair at the time. And that touched every platform. I ran everything from Twitter to YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, which was a surprising asset to us, the Giphy, so that we could have GIFs on Instagram, all sorts of things like that. And that was a wild ride, but I was able to do a few really innovative things there. And then after inauguration, I came to YouTube, where now I work in the civics vertical, as Jordan mentioned, working with I work with left of center civics. So that includes the entire Biden administration, elected officials, advocacy groups like the ACLU or Planned Parenthood, as well as candidates for office and anyone trying to use YouTube. And so it is my job to help them troubleshoot everything from making sure their channel is verified to making sure they have two-factor authentication on for security purposes, to content strategy, how to use the platform effectively, and how to reach people. So it's a fun job.
Awesome. So you mentioned the term new media, and I want to pick up on that because it's one I haven't heard in quite a while.
I know, a throwback.
New media, right? New media, as you call it, it isn't so new anymore. This is a really mature field of communications. And yet I wonder if you think that it gets the attention, credit, and thought that it deserves in comparison with other ways of communicating in organizations like the ones you've worked in or at federal agencies like the folks attending today's event are representing.
I definitely think it doesn't. It's interesting that it still kind of has, I feel like particularly in government and campaigns in this sector, digital still has the reputation of being like the kids sitting at the adults table for the first time. Or it's like, just give it to the like 20-year-old and see what they do, when in reality it is a very professional like job. You have to be professional, you have to know what you're doing, and it is a skill set and an expertise. And like someone who is good at social media might not be good at video editing. Like those are different talents and skill sets, and both are very valuable and important. um and I think it's gotten better, but for the most part, digital communications and social media is still really bifurcated from traditional comms. And I think there's an overemphasis on the value of things like press releases or op-eds or traditional media hits, when in reality, most Americans and most people that we're trying to reach are, that's not how we're going to reach them. They're online. That is where people are.
So in addition, crafting good social media takes time. It's expertise and time, right? So what makes the juice worth the squeeze for federal communicators? Why should they be investing time here?
I think it really comes back to meeting people where they are. Like at YouTube, we talk 88% of US adults use YouTube every month. And like the average daily watch time on YouTube is 60 minutes. Like people are there, and you just have to make sure your content gets in front of them. And so that is true of many platforms and many places. Like people are already there, and it's more about making sure your content is there and served to them rather than trying to drag people to you. And I think like the value of that is really important, and like coming to people, being where they are, and making it as easy as possible for them to receive your message. It seems to me, it seems like a no-brainer, right? Like you want to make this easy, you want to give people your content and just have it right in front of them, rather than just kind of like dragging people along to where you have decided they should be.
So I should say here for our audience, if you have a question for Emily, we'll get to your questions a little bit later on. So please drop them in the chat and we'll be happy to address them. So Emily, you and I were talking before the event started about an initiative we have here at the partnership, the Public Affairs Officer Roundtable for Assistant Secretaries of Public Affairs. And we recently spoke with those folks about social media. And while those that either had a direct connection to the public through the services that they provide or compelling visual content, saw a clear reason to use social media. So a lot of them pointed to, oh gosh, I wish we were the Department of Interior and we could just post beautiful glamour shots on Instagram every day of the work that we do. But the Department of Labor, the Social Security Administration felt that was a little more challenging for them to find a use case. So some agencies weren't sure how their content could work on these platforms. Can you speak a little bit to how federal communicators can approach finding their use case for social media?
Yeah, so this is I think there are a few good examples of people who are getting like really creative. I would point towards the US Army. That is a really good YouTube channel to look at. They, in like 7 months, grew their channel from 250,000 subscribers to now they're over 1 million. And it was simply because they invested in shorts, and they made their content more dynamic and personal and focused on members of the Army, on soldiers. Some other things, like it's really just thinking about your audience and your goal. Like I remember when I was at the DNC, we were thinking about like those weeks right before election day, and like what was the use of our Twitter account at that point. We probably weren't going to change anyone's mind with a tweet. Like we probably weren't doing persuasion, in the last 2 weeks of October. So we converted our Twitter into what I called like airline customer service for voters. And it was basically, when you tweet that you had a problem on Delta, like your flight was delayed, Delta replies right back to you. They're like, we will solve this, because they don't want the, backlash publicly. What we did is we searched for people posting their I voted stickers or saying that they had just voted or voted early. And we thanked them for being a voter and asked them to remind 3 friends to vote. And so it was like the vote tripling theory. And if someone tweeted like, I don't know where my polling place is, we searched for people asking for their polling place. And we were like, hi, like this is our website where you can look up your polling location, like let us know if it works. And just kind of like finding people where they were. And it was no other Twitter account was really going to do that, but at DNC. So that's what we did. And it's kind of about like, what is your goal? And then finding how you can use your accounts to do that. So, getting a little creative, and like, not every agency needs to be on every platform, I would say. Like, if you don't see the value in it, you don't see how it's going to reach your goals, maybe you don't need it. Maybe Elon's Twitter is not for you. I don't know.
I also wonder about, and maybe you could speak a little bit from your personal experience, it's not enough to just have one message that extends across all these platforms, right? Like, you really have to think about the kinds of content that play best in each platform. I wonder if you could share a little bit about some of the best practices and learnings you've had about what connects on any given platform.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of individual platform strategies. Like, I think your Twitter strategy should be different than your Facebook strategy, than Snap and YouTube, mostly because you're gonna reach different audiences there. And I think like to me, the first step is like going into your audience analytics. Pretty much every platform, I don't even think pretty much, I think every platform provides at least some kind of baseline audience analytics. You can get a gender breakdown. I find geographic breakdowns really helpful. I think a lot of times like government accounts reach the coasts, and it's like, how are you talking to people in Kansas? How are you reaching them? And that is always kind of my first stop, because most of the time when I'm running accounts, what's really different is age. So we'll have a much bigger age stratification on YouTube than we would on Twitter or Snapchat. Like when I was running the DNC Snapchat, it was 18 to 24. That like everyone was 18 to 24. YouTube, it's like 15 to 60. It's a much bigger audience, and you got to think about diversifying your content that way. And also seeing what other people are doing, other successful people you want to emulate, other accounts that are really doing what you would like to do, and figuring out how you can make it your own. And not to plug a Google product, but I am here to plug a Google product. Google Trends, taking advantage of Google Trends and seeing what people are searching for when they're searching for your agency, your principal, whoever. You can see the other search terms. You can see when search spikes. You can see where people are when they're searching it. A deeply powerful tool to making sure that your content is what is coming up when people are searching for you. Like, I don't give other people those clicks. That is like my biggest pet peeve, is like, don't give away clicks when people are actively searching for you. Make sure you have something that fits that bill.
So I want to pull a question in from the audience here, because I think it's timely and refers back to something you said just a few minutes ago. Delaney asks, do you think it's better to give people access to information directly on social rather than linking back to a website? How do you approach or advise the people that you're working with on navigating that challenge?
I definitely think it's better to have the information directly on social, if only because your click-through rate on something that's going to take someone off platform it's going to be really low. So I think like a read more, or like more info, is usually really important or like appropriate, but having like that direct hit of what you want them to know on platform is really important, because people click-through rates are really low, particularly on like Twitter and Facebook. And if your goal is to bring someone to a website, is that if that's what you're trying to do, doing things like embedding a YouTube video in it, or embedding a tweet, and like making the site a bigger draw, I think can be really helpful if that is where you want people to end up. But generally, if the goal is to give people information, on platform is the best way to do it.
So you mentioned Elon's Twitter, and I'm sure that that's on a lot of people's minds. Don't want to ask you to speak too much about a competitor, but we did hear from we did hear from some of these lead communicators that we meet with monthly some apprehension about using certain social platforms, given the challenges and criticism levied at some of them of late. So why, given that context, is this still a place agencies need to be investing time? And how do you suggest they grapple with those really tough questions of where where to put their messages?
Yeah, this is tough, and I have definitely been a part of many of these conversations. Like there was a moment at the DNC where we questioned if we should be on Facebook. And I think there was some sort of like an advertiser strike happened, and we continued advertising on Facebook because that's where voters are. And like, that's where people are. And I think like weighing the opportunity cost of not being on any given platform. But it is also important to look at the user base of a platform and decide if it's worth the risk. Like I would point out that most Americans do not have a Twitter account. Most Americans do not use Twitter. So that should factor into that decision making. Another thing that I think is really helpful is to look to industry leaders in the space and kind of see what they are doing. I thought it was interesting. There was an Axios article that came out that there was White House guidance on we will not be paying for Twitter Blue. We will not be paying for verification. Verification no longer means anything. It just means you paid for the account. So the White House has decided not to do it. And they will not be reimbursing people on their official White House accounts who choose to pay for it. And like, that can be a good guidepost to people, right? Like the White House is a leader in the space. What they decide to do can influence decisions like throughout politics and civics. And that can be a help guiding post. Like I think a good rule of thumb is remembering that like you are not the only account. Other people are making these decisions too. They're also having these conversations, and just think about what is the cost of not being there. We talk at YouTube a lot about, we have the 4 R's that we kind of guide us, and it's like remove, raise, reduce. Like we can only raise good authoritative content if good authoritative content is on the platform. And we can reduce harmful content as much as we want, but something's going to come up when someone searches on YouTube. Like something's going to be there. And I always try to advocate like that content should be made by authoritative sources with good intent. Like that is what we want to raise in the algorithm.
So with that in mind, and I'm sure you can speak most to YouTube, but maybe you've got insights on other platforms as well. Like what kind of content are the audiences coming to YouTube craving? What are they looking for in your space? The kinds of things that if these federal communicators with us today are thinking about what could we create that would play on YouTube, what's really successful?
Behind the scenes content, particularly on shorts. So if you have like a really well produced long form video on YouTube, a short of like behind the scenes of making it, really cool. Like people really like that. Another thing I really emphasize thinking about is just like, what can you give your audience that no one else can? You know, I think a lot, this happens on the Hill a lot, is they share clips of their members speaking on the floor or in committee, and it's literally a clip from C-SPAN. And I'm like, C-SPAN also posted that, but C-SPAN doesn't have access to your office. They don't have access to the member preparing for a hearing. They don't have access to a member writing a speech. Like, talk to a speechwriter. If you don't have access to your principal, like maybe the press secretary wants to be on your YouTube channel, right? Have a different people. Direct to camera content always performs really well. Faces, people like humans, they like other people, and they like to feel like they have the inside scoop. So if you can give anything, you don't have to actually give them the inside scoop, but anything that makes them feel like they have the inside scoop, great content. We love to see it. But I think what can you give your audience that no one else can is usually a really good starting point.
A great question from Paul that just came in. How can the folks on the call today communicate with YouTube to promote reliable and accurate content over misinformation? Is there a great way that you all like to have things flagged for you in either direction?
So if you think that something is truly in like violation of a community guidelines, like you can email us civics-youtube@google.com. We do rely on people flagging misinformation for us to see all of it so that it can come down. And like, I would just encourage people to make sure you are familiar with our community guidelines policy, because sometimes I understand not liking it doesn't necessarily mean that it's in violation. I too share this struggle, but I'm like constantly like, why doesn't that come down? Can that come down? Um, but generally, so the authoritative content, like that is actually like baked into the YouTube algorithm. And things from like news sources, like we have our trusted news organizations and organizations that we work with called trusted flaggers, that have been like deeply trained on YouTube guidelines. And they are like so a good example is like Every Town for Gun Safety is in our trusted flagger program, and they help us flag and find firearms content that is in violation of our policies. And there are a lot of organizations like NBC, CNN, CBS that are also like in our trusted flagger program that help like identify content on the platform that needs to come down. And there are two categories. There are videos that are just in violation, and those come down. And then there are videos that are like on the line and like they haven't crossed it yet. And that is when we move into reduce, and that gets reduced in the algorithm and not served to users as much, and it doesn't appear in recommendations.
So thank you. Going back to what you were speaking about with respect to the kinds of content that play well, does content need to be highly produced? Does it need to be super slick? Do you need to spend a lot of money on it to make it successful?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You can do it on your phone. And in fact, like particularly with shorts, so I want to encourage everyone to think about and invest in shorts. It is like that's how the Army went from 250,000 subscribers to 1 million in less than a year. Pretty unprecedented growth for a military branch, to be sure, but any kind of government channel. And like thinking shorts can be edited on your phone, on mobile. Like the editor is baked into the YouTube app. You should just film shorts on your phone. Like just do it. You definitely don't need to have something highly produced. We have recommendations for like government gear, that is kind of like the lower priced things. So should you have budget to buy things, we do have like recommendations, but for the most part, like work with what you got. It doesn't have to be that slick. The era of YouTube where it was like the fancy DSLR camera and a ring light, like that's really over. You don't need that. And shockingly, people are always surprised when I say this, your audio quality matters so much more than your video quality. People will stand for watching like a dimly lit video. They will not stand to listening to like the wind blowing across your mic. They will turn it right off. They will exit right out of that video. They will not stand for it. So if you're going to invest in anything, audio.
Awesome. I want to back up. You mentioned shorts. I wonder, for those who maybe aren't familiar with that side of YouTube, that platform within YouTube, could you just share a little bit about what that platform is, the kinds of videos that show up there, etc.?
Yeah, so Shorts is our newest product. It was, I think, 2021 when Shorts like really appeared, and now it is kind of just like Instagram Reels or TikTok videos. It is vertical content, takes up your full screen. Users can swipe through it just like Reels or TikTok. It's a very familiar interface, but it is a different recommendations algorithm. So you are reaching a much wider audience on Shorts than you are on long form video. You are reaching much wider than your subscriber base or people searching or like appearing in recommended. So it's currently the #1 way channels are being discovered by users. So it is a huge subscription driver, really important. And key to me, the thing I always point out, it's in the YouTube app. You just swipe. So it's one app, but also if you're swiping and there's a short from a channel that you are not subscribed to, there is a big red subscribe button at the bottom to encourage people to subscribe to your channel and find your long form content as well. And we've seen channels that are investing in both content types, so we call them hybrid channels, investing in shorts and long form are the channels that are growing the fastest, just bar none. There were a few creators who, when we introduced shorts, they decided to make a second channel and have that just be all their shorts content, almost all those creators have decided that that was a bad idea and they have moved their shorts to their regular channel.
Just a reminder for our audience, if you have questions for Emily, please throw them in the chat and we will address them in just a few minutes. Emily, before we get to some more audience questions, I wonder, do you see white space on your platform or elsewhere on social that could be filled by federal communicators? Are there niches that are starved for content where the folks joining us today could jump in and really make a big difference and have an impact?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I feel like most of our government is kind of like a blank slate on YouTube. Like there's just not a lot of content. It's a lot of live streaming, which I would like to encourage you all to continue doing. Live stream your press conferences, live stream speeches. That's great. But, you know, I think in terms of a produced long form video, something that gives new information to users or is kind of like made for the platform, that's not really happening. Most people are posting content that they're also posting elsewhere, which is fine, particularly if you are like really strapped for resources. I know like we all struggle with resources, but having content that is specifically made for the platform can be so powerful. Or if you have a principal that is really leaned in to the internet or digital, or someone who performs well, reaching out to creators to be featured on their channels. That is something that I am always trying to work on. It can be very challenging to make it happen, but really worth it in the end if you can make it happen. Some pretty cool stuff can happen. There are also a lot of independent journalists on YouTube. People like Johnny Harris, like who used to be at Vox and now he's just an independent journalist on YouTube. Like they have really interesting channels. They would love to do interviews with people and have it featured on their channels. I think like you can think beyond just your channel, and that is something that I'm really. It can be very hard, but I'm working on making it easier, I think.
All right, thanks, Emily. Let's turn to a few audience questions. So Elizabeth says, despite Emily's affiliation and realizing this depends on each agency, which social media tools and apps would be most likely to get the best response if you have a limited budget and a small team? For example, is it best to focus on blogs versus YouTube versus LinkedIn versus etc.? How do you advise folks to think about using limited resources across platforms?
I think if you have limited resources, you got to think about what is your most important audience, like who are you trying to reach? Like if you're trying to reach reporters, like if that, you probably want to invest time in Twitter. Like I will complain about Twitter until my last gasping breath, but every reporter in the Western world is on that platform. So if you're trying to drum up earned media or trying to do something like that, you probably want to invest in Twitter. If you are trying to reach like the broadest like scope of Americans, YouTube is probably your best bet. Most US adults use YouTube. They use like 500 hours of content are uploaded every minute to YouTube. It's a lot of content. It's also the #1 video search engine in the world. It's the #2 search engine in the world behind our parent company. So like it's an important tool. People go to YouTube to search and learn and do things. Like I remember when I was interviewing for this job, they asked me what was the last YouTube video you watched, and I answered, I was like, oh, I watched a video on how to fix my garbage disposal because I broke my garbage disposal. And they're like, yeah, people go to YouTube to learn. And so if you're trying to educate an audience, I would advocate for YouTube. But also knowing your shorts can be posted to Instagram Reels, you know, like if that is something you have to do, that's what you have to do. We all have limited resources. You have limited time, limited budget. Do what you got to do.
Reminder, if you have a question for Emily, please post it in the chat so we can address it here. Delaney asks, for government agencies who are lesser known and looking to build brand awareness, but also struggle with most content being confidential, you have any recommendations for tactics and strategies to build awareness across social? So there's a lot packed into that question. So maybe we can take this in two. Like, could we start from how do you start from small first, and then we can address the confidential piece?
Yeah, I think this is where collabs or interviews can really help, not just with creators, but other agencies, other government officials. You can do things like both carry the same live stream, or cross posting can really help boost if you're working with another agency that has a larger audience. Or I always encourage people, if you want to work with a YouTube creator, you don't have to set your sights on Mr. Beast. Like, he's the largest subbed creator on YouTube. Like, that's not going to happen. I can't get that man to the White House. It's just not going to happen. But like a really niche creator who's got just a couple thousand people, but they fit your niche, perfect. Like, it's mutually beneficial. Like, just think about your space and like what makes sense. There is probably someone on YouTube creating content about it. I can almost guarantee there's a lot of content on YouTube. There are people who simply open children's toys. Like, everything happens on YouTube. It's wild. It's a broad universe. You can take advantage of it. The confidentiality piece is interesting. I don't really know what I'd say about that. I think, what can you say and put that online? I don't know. That's really, you're walking a fine line there with confidentiality.
Yeah. I wonder if we could take a twist on that and maybe speak a little bit to an agency that doesn't directly serve the public and maybe is very, that doesn't have the compelling content, say, and I mean this with no disrespect, of a NASA or a Department of the Interior or something like that. That the work is maybe thrilling, right? How would you suggest they mine for things that will stand out, that are exciting? Because there are those exciting things happening in every agency.
Yeah, and I think people just don't know about them. I do recommend, this is one thing I have to remind myself a lot, things that we take for granted, like the public doesn't know about them. Like, I recently had to teach my colleagues like what an advanced team does, because they had no idea. So don't forget about things that seem boring to you. That's going to be interesting to someone. There's someone who doesn't know about that. They don't know how an event comes together. They don't know how a speech is written. They don't know how people prepare for things. So even if you're kind of looking at something that seems mundane, you can probably make that into some pretty compelling and interesting content. Just take advantage of it. We're all jaded, and we're all used to this. Most people are not used to the kind of things that we do, or even know what agencies exist within the federal government. Like, they don't know, and people would be interested if they did.
And I'll just say that's one of the things that we at the partnership aim to do as well, is to shine a light on those stories that don't get told elsewhere and help the American public to better understand what their government does on their behalf every day. We would love to have more agencies help join us in that effort. All right, Aaron says, can you give us some examples of social accounts, federal or non-federal, you think are doing an amazing job, and ones that we could look to for some inspiration?
Yes. I mentioned the U.S. Army. I keep mentioning them. I want to be clear, they're not my partner. Someone else works with them. I'm not bragging about my hard work there. I'm bragging about my coworkers' hard work. I also think one channel that I like to talk about when it comes to repurposing content is Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, her campaign channel, the AOC channel. They download her Instagram stories and put them on YouTube. And it's because I showed them on Google Trends. I was like, hey, the number one thing people are searching for AOC on YouTube is AOC Instagram. You should probably make sure that your channel is what comes up there. And they just, put a thumbnail on it. They stitch it all together. It's the number one driver of subscribers to their channel. A really great example of like working with what you got. I also think, I've mentioned the White House a few times, but in terms of live streaming, the White House live streams every day, because they live stream anytime the president makes remarks, and they live stream every press briefing, and they've really got it down to a fine science. They have like thumbnails that they just repurpose every time, like for remarks or press briefing or speech. And I think they're a good example when it comes to live streaming. I also, I would look to Europe. I would look at, in France, Macron's channel. He has recently started doing YouTube Q&As. It's a very YouTube-y format. They sourced questions from people from Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and they put the screenshot right on the screen. He answers direct to camera. It's a really casual but familiar format to YouTube viewers. It's really good. They're doing some cool stuff in France. So I would look, not in a while because he's a little busy right now, but there's some really good content. I think the Macron example is a good example of taking a format that is familiar to YouTube users, the creator direct camera Q&A, and making it work for a government official, and in this case, a head of state.
Brian asks, do you recommend a certain cadence for posting to YouTube? And what would you suggest folks set as a call to action or a goal to measure success?
So there is no cadence I'd recommend. What I recommend is consistency. So if you're going to post a long form video, you just set a schedule and literally put it in the description of your YouTube channel, like in the about section. We post new content every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Like, you've probably heard that from YouTube creators if you've spent a decent amount of time on the platform. Consistency is what drives viewership, not frequency. Almost no one believes me when I say this, but I really, really promise frequency is not as important. If you only have the capacity to do one video a month, post that video at the same day and time. Do it the first Friday at noon every month, like, or whatever works for you. That is so much more important than being frequent. Shorts, I would try and be as frequent as possible. I would post, if you could post a short every day, post a short every day. I think, like, generally I recommend when people are starting out, do 2 a week, then 3 a week, and then kind of do every other day on shorts, because usually that is reasonable. People can handle doing that. A mobile produced under 60 seconds. Every other day for government creators usually works.
So Jermaine asks, and maybe you just answered this, how long are shorts typically? Are we talking under 60 seconds?
They are all under 60 seconds. Yeah.
Jen asks, do you think edutainment will continue to be a big trend? And have you seen any government agencies doing this well on YouTube?
Yes, I do. I don't know that I've seen any agencies do kind of edutainment particularly well. I do know there are some members that do some interesting things, like Cory Booker always reads, he does like a children's story for like Read Across America every year. He like reads a book to kids and things like that. Yeah, there's a lot of edutainment. There's a lot of content, but I haven't seen a lot of it, particularly from government agencies.
All right. Just a final reminder for the folks joining us today. If you have a question for Emily, please pop it in the chat so we can address it. I have one more here from Barbara, who says that in public transportation, they find a great variety of technological skills and social media savvy with their customers. Do you have any tips on helping their customers to get started with YouTube or any other platform and get them to adopt these technologies or use them in a way that would make them being there worthwhile?
I do think with YouTube shorts is like a good gateway because they're going to be familiar with that format from other platforms. So if you're trying to help people get started on YouTube, shorts is like, they use Instagram Reels, if they use TikTok, they're familiar with the vertical short form video format. So it translates pretty well. People get really nervous about long form like video content or vlogging or whatever, but it's really fun and cool. So I think helping people kind of just understand the mechanics. Setting up a YouTube channel is really easy, but people think it's really hard. It is not. You just need a Google account and you basically have a YouTube channel. And you just kind of go through the steps the same way you would any other platform. It's about making the content, like helping people feel comfortable. And that's why I really like advocate for helping people start with shorts, because it's a lot easier to feel comfortable in 60 seconds than it is in like 10 minutes.
All right, last question here from Delaney. Does YouTube offer any type of training for government agencies? If these folks want to learn more about how to use the platform well, is there anything they can do?
They can email civics-youtube@google.com and I will train you. I am your trainer.
Awesome. Emily, with that, we're coming up on our time. I want to thank you so much for being here and sharing your amazing insights on how our federal communicators can leverage these platforms to get their messages out. It's been a fascinating and fun conversation.
Yeah.
And I want to thank everybody who joined us today. We'll be doing events for federal communicators roughly once a quarter this year, so be on the lookout for our next installment. And from all of us at the Partnership for Public Service, thank you so much and have a great day.
Thanks.